Joining me now, Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds. Welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
It's good to be back with you.
All right, let me start with this. Did you, going into Tuesday, imagine it would be quite as decisive as it was, not only at the top of the ticket, but the Senate, the House races as well? Still waiting on the House.
Well, I did, but before we get to that, I want to thank the American people for voting for Donald Trump, for allowing us the opportunity to go in there and get the job done and making our nation great again. We're going to get to work. But to your question, I did think it was going to be decisive because it didn't matter what state you were in. The same issues were bothering the American people. A terrible economy, high inflation, open borders, and conflict around the globe. Donald Trump is the person, the candidate, the man with the ability to fix these problems. The American people saw it clearly. That's why his victory was overwhelming.
Okay, let's talk about his critics who have now ominous warnings now that he is once again president-elect. David French writing at the New York Times, if Trump was telling the truth about his intentions, then he will attempt a campaign of retribution and mass deportation that will fracture families, create chaos in American communities, and potentially even result in active duty troops being deployed to our cities. Here's what your House colleague, Democratic Congressman Richie Torres, had to say.
One of the fundamental differences between his first presidency and his subsequent presidency is the fact that he now enjoys absolute immunity, and he seems to be intent on exacting revenge against his political enemies.
How do you respond to Americans who say they now are fearful about a second Trump presidency?
For the American people who've been listening to these lies from the Democratic left, I would tell you this is not something that Donald Trump has ever spoken to or he's committed to whatsoever. There's no enemies list. I mean, yeah, there are people who've been opposed to him, but he is focused on the American people. Job number one is securing our border and beginning the process of deporting illegal immigrants out of our country. Job number two is getting our economy thriving again, becoming energy dominant again. That's his focus. His focus is the American people, not some enemies list that only gets talked about in the Daily Kos or Salon.com or any other place like that. He's focused on making our country great. And what will happen in our country is success is going to be the measurement that he will use to demonstrate he's back in the White House and back in charge of running this nation. The metric is success. There is no other measure.
Okay, to that point, Joe Rogan, who was a late endorser of President Trump, says he now does have to take this sweeping victory. He's got great opportunity to try to bring things together and get things done. Here's what he said post-election.
And we got a real chance to make real change. He's got to not attack the left and not attack everybody. Let them all talk their shit, but unite. Now it's time to unite everybody.
There are a lot of skeptics out there who don't think President Trump is going to be about unity. What do you say to Joe Rogan's point?
I think what Joe Rogan is saying is absolutely correct. And Donald Trump's going to be focused on those things. Look at the announcements he's already made. One of the key things is he wants to support a constitutional amendment to bring congressional term limits. That is something that overwhelmingly the American people have supported for a very long time. Look at what's happening already across the globe. Qatar wants Hamas out of Doha. You have the Chinese are signaling they want peaceful relations. You have the Russians and the Ukrainians now saying they're open to talking. The European Union wants to buy liquid natural gas from the United States. This caravan that was building below our southern border is now starting to break up because they know Donald Trump's going to be the next president of the United States, and we are not going to tolerate more illegal immigration. Those are the things that unite the American people. If you have talking heads on the left who still want to go down the line of their conspiracy theories, let them. Donald Trump's going to be focused on the American people.
Well, one of the places that he made up a lot of ground with was black voters, black male voters in particular. And I know that you hosted events specifically to have conversations with them. What did you hear at those events that gives you an understanding of why there was that shift in the electorate?
I heard the same thing talking to black men that I heard talking to anybody across our country. How are we going to get ahead and make more money, be able to pass something on to our children? How are we going to secure this southern border? It's not fair that you have illegals coming in, getting gas cards, getting hotel stays and all the like. That's not right. And actually, you'll notice that the city of New York has now announced they're not giving out any more food cards, these food cards. That's because of Donald Trump and the fact that he won. So what you heard from black men, you heard also from Hispanic men. You heard also from, in part, suburban women. They want a country that is safe. They want an economy that is thriving. And Donald Trump is going to deliver on all of those promises.
So we're going to talk a little bit later in the show about the path for Democrats or Republicans to hold control of the House. And already the speaker is talking about an ambitious agenda if Republicans do control the House, Senate, and White House. Reuters points out this. They say the tax cut proposals that Trump made on the campaign trail, from extending the 2017 tax cuts to abolishing tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security benefits, could add $7.5 trillion to the nation's debt over the next decade. They cite the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Some of those things are on the to-do list for Republicans. So what are the offsets to those cuts? And what about this issue of the national debt, which, frankly, a lot of folks think did not get nearly enough discussion, if any at all, in the campaign trail?
Well, two quick things. When anybody talks about tax policy from these foundations, what they never say to the American people is that when they talk about $7 trillion is the cost, that's using static modeling. I don't want to get too technical, but that is static modeling. It doesn't take into effect the impact of lower tax rates and economic growth as a result. So no, it doesn't cost $7 trillion. And the reason why we know this is because under his first tax policy, which is current tax law today, the Democrats and all these outside groups said it would cost $5 trillion. The truth is the federal government raised more tax revenue than was ever modeled or contemplated by any of these organizations. So President Trump's tax policy is actually going to be a net benefit to the United States because it's going to breed more economic growth. Number two, there are massive areas in the federal government that do need to be scaled back, that need to be cut. One of them that we have to take a long, hard look at are the Green New Deal tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act. We need to look at those because they told us in D.C. it would cost $276 billion. Well, if you go talk to Goldman Sachs and anybody on the street, the value is actually $1.4 trillion. So if you want to find money to pay for tax policy so we can grow our economy, so working families can get ahead with no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, how about we get rid of the Democrat spending boondoggles that came in under the last administration?
I want to make sure I ask you about something reported by the Daily Wire. They broke a story a couple of days ago about FEMA. My home state is, as well as where you serve, Florida, and your district has been hit very hard by numerous big storms the last couple of years. Daily Wire reporting that people were told when they're out canvassing in Central Florida looking for people who may need help, that FEMA workers were told to avoid homes that had Trump symbols or Trump flags. FEMA responded to Daily Wire saying this: "We are horrified that this took place and therefore have taken extreme actions to correct this situation." Governor DeSantis says he's launching an investigation there. What extreme actions do you think should be taken? And is that something Congress gets involved with?
Anybody involved with that should be fired immediately, not asked to resign, not brought in front of a congressional hearing. They should be fired immediately. We are not going to have a country where we're going to decide who gets help and who doesn't based upon who you support politically or what you look like or anything else. Secondarily, when it comes to FEMA, my recommendation for the Trump transition team is that FEMA becomes a standalone agency that directly reports to the White House. You have to get it out of Homeland Security. That agency is a massive labyrinth with a bunch of different departments. FEMA should be a direct report agency to the White House because when disaster recovery needs to take place, we need quick answers out of FEMA, not bureaucratic ones that go through the labyrinth of federal departments. My district dealt with this firsthand a couple years ago during Hurricane Ian. It was very hard to get answers out of FEMA, still somewhat hard to get answers out of FEMA. I think if you talk to any governor, they would agree with this. FEMA needs to be a direct report agency to the White House. That way, the people of America, when disaster strikes, they know that this has the first priority of the president. The president has eyes on it, and they're going to get the help that they need immediately.
Well, we know folks in your area still need a lot of help, as well as the Helene victims all through Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Tennessee as well. We're tracking that too. Congressman, thank you very much.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.